there was a point where he was delusional and having kind of episodes that were drug related, but brushes with the law and flirting with kind of homelessness and it was unsustainable. He'd been through rehab a couple of times unsuccessfully, and looked like it was just getting worse.
Ron Howard always seemed untouchable, calm, collected, and glowing with that Hollywood charm that never cracked no matter what storm hit around him. The man everyone called the Golden Boy. Spotless image, flawless career, no chaos, no scandal, just endless success. But behind that perfect smile was a weight he never shared, the kind of pressure that eats away quietly while the world keeps clapping for you. Everything changed after the heartbreaking loss of Rob Reiner. That moment shattered something deep inside Ron. The industry stood still, but he didn't. For the first time, Ron started speaking from the heart, and his words weren't the polished kind you hear on red carpets. They were sharp, honest, and full of emotion. He pulled the curtain back on the quiet rivalries, the unspoken tension, and the kind of respect that's rarely captured in glossy interviews. No one expected this side of Ron Howard, and that's exactly why it shook people so much. Reiner's passing clearly unlocked something buried, something raw. Ron began to reflect on how fragile the entertainment world really is, how quickly fame flips, and how even the brightest stars carry stories of struggle behind the shine.
Today I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michelle Singer Reiner.
It wasn't distant, it wasn't rehearsed, it was real. His silence didn't fade over time, it cracked open, spilling out memories that felt heavier than words could handle. When he hinted at moments tied directly to Rob Reiner, people suddenly realized their connection wasn't just professional, it ran deep, way deeper than anyone had imagined. Ron Howard's story now echoes louder than ever. Born on March 1st, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, he didn't chase fame, he was raised in it. His parents, actor Rance Howard and actress Jean Spiegel, built a home where creativity thrived, but discipline ruled just as strongly. Long hours, huge expectations, and constant pressure. That mix shaped Ron Howard before he even knew what childhood really meant. While most kids were figuring out toys and cartoons, Ron was already standing under studio lights, surrounded by cameras flashing in his tiny face. At just 18 months old, he made his first appearance in Frontier Woman, stepping straight into a life that would never slow down again.
People would ask me from the publishing world, did I ever think I would do an autobiography or memoir? And I always said, no, don't think so. But I asked Tom one day, and he said, well, if you ever do it, focus on your child.
By the late 1950s, the Howard family packed up and moved to California, and that's when normal vanished completely. Playgrounds were replaced with long auditions, scripts took the place of bikes, and film sets became his neighborhood. While other kids ran around outside losing baby teeth, Ron was memorizing lines with tutors sitting beside rolling cameras. His childhood wasn't sad, just tightly controlled, carefully managed, and far from free. Years later, he'd call it a golden cage. Safe, shiny, but locked tight. Then came October 3rd, 1960, the day everything exploded. The Andy Griffith Show premiered, and suddenly 6-year-old Ron became America's favorite kid overnight. That sweet smile turned him into the face families trusted, the image of innocence on every TV screen. But behind that glow was a quiet boy doing math homework between takes, sitting alone in cramped studio rooms while the laughter of other kids echoed outside. Fame looked warm from the outside, but up close, it felt cold. His father, Rance, did everything to protect.
We were the #1 show in television, and yet Andy wanted to move on. And that's what was going to happen. And I was okay with it. I wasn't like all year tormented by this.
Him pushing for better scripts and drilling one rule into him that shaped his whole career. Never act cute, act honest. That lesson stuck forever, grounding him in truth even when Hollywood demanded sparkle. But it couldn't erase the cost of growing up under pressure. Ron was adored by millions on screen, yet never truly free off it. Around the same time, another kid was walking the same path. Rob Reiner. Both of them grew up inside that bright but suffocating Hollywood bubble. Both had strong fathers guiding them through a maze of producers, spotlights, and expectations. They learned young that fame can lift you up, but it also boxes you in, keeps you performing even when your heart's begging for rest. Those heavy feelings didn't fade when the cameras stopped rolling. They built up quietly, year after year. By the time The Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, Ron was just 14, but already carried the weight of...
In their earliest stages, when they might have been able to do something, I think I was a voice kind of telling them to back off as parents. And so those are regrets that I...
8 nonstop seasons inside a world that wasn't real. His schooling split between classrooms and sound stages. His lunch breaks shared not with classmates, but with seasoned actors twice his age. It was loving and supportive, but isolating too. One moment says it all. During The Music Man, 8-year-old Ron froze mid-scene, whispering, "I can't do it." Shirley Jones calmed him down, and the crew shot around his mistakes so no one would notice. The audience saw confidence. Behind the scenes was fear, pressure, and a kid just trying to keep it together. That's exactly why Ron's empathy for Rob Reiner cuts so deep now. They weren't just peers, they were mirrors of each other. 2 child actors learning how to survive under endless eyes, learning that behind every perfect take is a kid struggling to breathe. That truth, now finally out in the open, is changing how people see them both, not just as stars, but as survivors of a system that rarely lets kids stay kids. Those quiet anxieties never left Ron Howard. He just learned to hide them.
Which was all about accuracy and authenticity. And slowly but surely, I just began to find real joy and creativity, ingenuity through the research, through the fact-finding, and then finding ways to use everything that I learned about drama and comedy, for that matter, to sort of present these ideas to audiences in ways that could be really,
Behind that calm, trusted smile was armor, carefully built to survive a world full of egos, pressure, and constant judgment. While others like Rob Reiner shouted loud and bold, Ron learned to protect himself with silence, patience, and grace. Ron had always been the quiet observer, watching, learning, reading every room before making a move. Then came 1974, and everything flipped overnight. Happy days hit the air, and 19-year-old Ron walked into Gary Marshall's office without realizing that this one role would lock him into America's heart all over again. As Richie Cunningham, he became the symbol of the perfect small-town boy. Polite, kind, loyal, safe. Audiences adored him. But behind the curtain, things got tight. That clean-cut image everyone loved started to trap him, locking the real Ron behind a rehearsed smile that never seemed to fade. By 1977, at just 23, he was still pretending to be a high school kid while the real world outside was changing fast. Protests filled the news, new voices were rising, people were questioning everything, yet Richie stayed frozen in a cozy 1950s fantasy world that felt completely out of touch. That mismatch ate away at Ron until he couldn't keep quiet anymore. He sent a memo to ABC asking for one simple thing, a single storyline touching on the Vietnam War. Something honest, something real, something that reflected the chaos people his age were actually living through. The answer came back quickly, and it was a hard no. That rejection didn't explode publicly. It sank in quietly, turning into exhaustion that lived deep in his bones. He felt invisible, trapped inside a character he no longer recognized, living someone else's life while his own stayed paused. Eventually, the truth became too heavy to ignore.
But starting to think about a family, and when Cheryl completely supported me turning down the
If he wanted his voice back, he had to move behind the camera. That realization mirrored what Rob Reiner was also discovering. Both men were chasing authenticity inside a system obsessed with keeping people in neat little boxes. Directing wasn't Ron's fantasy. It was his lifeline, his escape route, his way to breathe again. Then came a break that would change everything. In 1977, legendary producer Roger Corman made Ron an offer that sounded wild: star in Eat My Dust, and in exchange, get the chance to direct his own film. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about control, ownership, finally steering his own destiny. That gamble turned into Grand Theft Auto, a wild car crash comedy co-written with his father, Rance Howard. The budget was tiny, around $62,000, but the dream was massive. They destroyed nearly 70 cars, shot daring stunts, and somehow turned that chaos into a $15 million hit. Suddenly, Hollywood noticed, and this time, they saw Ron not as a child star, but as a serious creator. For the first time in his life, Ron felt true creative power, the kind that acting never gave him. And it was addictive, but with control came pressure. Heavy, non-stop pressure. Every frame, every scene, every word mattered. He carried every success and every mistake like a weight on his chest. And the wins just kept coming. Night Shift, Splash, Cocoon, Willow, Parenthood. Each hit raised his status higher, but also built invisible walls of expectation that followed him everywhere he went. By the early 90s, Ron wasn't that sweet kid from Mayberry anymore. He was a powerhouse. And just like Rob Reiner, he found himself in a spotlight that didn't just shine, it burned if you stood under it too long. Then came Apollo 13 in 1995. Not just a movie, but a full-blown mission. Ron chased realism with near obsession. No shortcuts, no fake sets, no lazy tricks. The cast and crew filmed over 600 zero-gravity sequences, each lasting just 23 seconds. It was intense, exhausting, and absolutely groundbreaking. Mission Control was rebuilt from real NASA panels, bought for just $1 each, and every switch had to be flawless. Ron pushed himself harder than ever, working 18-hour days, barely sleeping, refusing to compromise. And eventually, the body pushed back. One morning, pure exhaustion hit like a wall, and everything stopped cold. Production halted, and the entire crew realized just how far Ron had pushed himself in the name of perfection. The crew waited in total silence. When Ron finally walked back onto set, pale, drained, but focused, they surprised him wearing shirts that read Mission Control. It was their way of saying, "We've got you!" That small act hit him harder than any review ever could. In that moment, he realized passion had crossed a dangerous line.
And so I recognize that ambition, that idea to go beyond, to keep reaching, to keep trying to come up with something else for audience.
The cost of perfection had finally shown itself. That was the day Ron learned what Rob Reiner already knew too well. Chasing brilliance can quietly pull you away from yourself. That lesson burned deep, and it never left him. So when the world later lost Rob, Ron didn't just feel grief, he felt reflection, recognition. Two creators who had lived under the same intense spotlight, both learning that devotion can easily turn into isolation if no one steps back in time. Even before Rob's passing, Ron was already carrying heartbreak that never truly healed. Back in 1991, life looked picture perfect on paper. A thriving career, full creative control, and a new baby at home. His daughter Jocelyn had just been born, and from the outside, it seemed like Ron Howard had it all. But then came the choice that would change everything, a 6-month shoot in Ireland for Far and Away. Ron convinced himself he could handle the distance. His wife, Cheryl, stayed home holding everything together. Newborn twins, their young daughter, Bryce Dallas Howard, and all the chaos that came with it. While Ron vanished into endless days of rewrites, rain-soaked filming, and pressure from the studio. He kept saying, "It's only temporary." But deep down, he knew he was drifting too far away. When he finally came home, silence said what words couldn't. The house felt different. Laughter felt distant. Something had cracked. And then came the moment that nearly broke him. His baby daughter didn't recognize him. Bryce barely reacted. Cheryl stood there carrying exhaustion that needed no explanation. Years later, Ron admitted that Day shattered something inside him. That's when the truth hit like a punch. Success meant nothing if it cost the people he loved most. No award could replace missed time. No praise could fix emotional distance. That night, he made a quiet promise, never again. He swore his career would never take more than it gave. But habits built over a lifetime don't disappear overnight. In 2005, during the grueling reshoots for Cinderella Man, those same patterns crept back in. Sleepless nights, endless edits, nonstop pressure to reach perfection. Once again, he was gone for months, and when he returned, his children hadn't just grown taller, like they'd grown into moments he'd missed completely. Cheryl held everything together as always, but Ron knew the weight wasn't shared evenly. That second wake-up call forced him to face a belief planted deep in childhood that he always had to say yes, always prove himself, always over-deliver. That drive had fueled his success, but also his guilt. And that realization stayed with him. Fast forward to 2025, Ron and Cheryl's 50th anniversary.
He was taking me over and playing me, tracks he just recorded. And, here he was, like, he couldn't contain himself. I mean, he'd start moving and kind of dancing and singing along with the lyrics and stopping and making changes and talking to the engineer. And I could just see how energized he was by the creativity of the moment.
Standing at John Burroughs High School, the place where they first met, Ron dropped all the armor. He donated a bench in Cheryl's honor and gave a speech that left everyone stunned. He said he'd trade every award, every box office hit, every single accolade, just to get back the time he lost with his children. No spin, no polish, just truth. That's why Rob Reiner's story hit him so hard. It wasn't just about loss, it was about understanding, a reminder of what both men had sacrificed in the chase for greatness. Two creators molded by the same blinding spotlight, both carrying the same hidden price behind the dream. And that reflection didn't stop there. It took Ron even deeper into his past. It pulled him back to the bond that grounded him before fame ever had a grip. His connection with his younger brother, Clint Howard. To the public, Clint was that unforgettable face, the one who popped up in every show and movie. But to Ron, Clint was proof that someone else truly understood what it meant to grow up under studio lights. They were raised side by side on neighboring sets, passing each other in hallways buzzing with cables and heat. Two kids earning paychecks before they could spell their own names, delivering lines before they even knew who they were. That shared beginning became Ron's quiet anchor, a reminder of who he really was before the fame, before the pressure, before the expectations that consumed everything. Clint was Ron's living reminder that he wasn't alone. They weren't just brothers, they were co-workers, survivors of a childhood spent performing for cameras that never stopped rolling. Most people could never understand what that really felt like. As Ron's career soared, Clint fought quieter battles, struggling with the weight of being known, but never fully seen. By the late 1980s, things were spiraling. Ron watched helplessly as his brother drifted further from himself. Then, in 1990, Ron finally drew the hardest line of his life. With no anger, only love, he said one sentence that changed everything. "Get help or lose me forever." It was brutal honesty, but it worked. Clint chose recovery. He chose life, and that choice saved him. Years later, the brothers shared their story publicly, crediting their bond and unwavering family loyalty for pulling them through. It was living proof that love, when pushed hard enough, can still bring someone back from the edge. But decades later, a new fear crept into Ron's life, one he couldn't outwork or plan around. Clint began facing a serious health battle. Ron never revealed details, but his voice said it all. This wasn't small, it was life-changing. For a man built on control and precision, this shattered everything. Ron couldn't call cut, couldn't rewrite the ending, couldn't protect his brother the way Clint once protected him when fame felt too heavy. For the first time, Ron confessed something that stunned everyone. He wasn't afraid of critics or failure or losing momentum. He was afraid of losing the one person who had walked beside him through every single chapter. That fear transformed him completely. Friends noticed how he slowed down, how he listened more, how his priorities shifted overnight. That pain, the raw, unfiltered kind, shaped how he saw Rob Reiner's story too. It wasn't just sympathy, it was recognition. Two men who spent their lives under the same blinding light, finally facing what it had cost them to stay there. Ron Howard finally had to face a truth he'd been dodging for years. No matter how careful you are, some stories are simply beyond control. No award can fix that. No perfect lighting or framing can save you from it. He admitted this hit deeper than any career setback, deeper than any flop or lost opportunity. Not even the biggest production pressure could compare to the fear that comes when family is at risk. He spoke about those sleepless nights, the kind where you can't stop replaying old memories like a movie in your head. The tiny classrooms, the studio corridors, the moments between takes that once felt comforting now felt fragile and distant. Guilt crept in quietly, guilt that his career soared while Clint fought his own quiet battles. Guilt that he didn't notice the signs sooner, guilt that he couldn't protect his brother forever, and that realization hit him like a wave. That guilt reshaped everything. Ron began stepping back from long shoots. He turned down projects, even restructured his own company to take himself out of the center. No more 18-hour days, no more chasing total control. His focus shifted to something real, presence, family dinners, slow mornings, quiet moments he used to let slip away. Now those moments are everything. And that's exactly why his reflections on Rob Reiner carry so much weight. This isn't just one filmmaker remembering another. It's one human recognizing another's struggle. Two men molded by love, loss, and the painful price of caring too deeply. Both once consumed by the machine that rewards obsession and punishes vulnerability. Today, Ron's life moves slower, softer, centered around what lasts. He refuses to lose the people he loves ever again. In one of the most honest moments of his entire career, he opened up about how the silence between projects changed him. He said he'd spent decades telling everyone else's stories and forgot to live his own. At 71, with a lifetime of hits behind him, he finally said what so many never dare to admit. None of it matters if the people you love start slipping away. That confession stunned fans. Not because he struggled, but because he had carried it all alone. The calm, steady director everyone saw was holding years of unspoken emotion inside. Just as Ron began to slow down, life hit again. Hard. News about Rob Reiner shattered his calm completely. Ron was already stretched thin, worried sick about his brother Clint's health when the headline appeared, and it stopped him cold. Rob wasn't just another peer, he was a mirror. Bold where Ron was measured, outspoken where Ron stayed composed, but both men driven by the same spark, truth. The same relentless passion that made them legends, and the same heavy cost that came with it. When Ron finally spoke about Rob, his voice cracked. He didn't talk about films or awards. He didn't bring up box office numbers or critical acclaim. Instead, he talked about love, about family, about how life can turn in an instant, faster than anyone's ready for. There's no script for moments like this, he said softly, and for once, the man known for total control had none left. Already burdened by fear for his brother Clint, the shock of Rob and Michelle's passing hit Ron like a tidal wave. It wasn't just grief, it was disbelief. It felt like life was stacking heartbreak on top of heartbreak, loss on top of loss. A brutal, humbling reminder that control is always temporary, and that even those who seem to have it all can be brought to their knees by the things they can't rewrite. It all came into focus at once. Slow down, stay grounded, and hold your family tighter than ever. The truths Ron Howard had only recently begun to face suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Rob Reiner's passing wasn't just another Hollywood headline, it was personal. It wasn't simply sadness, it was a mirror being held up to his own life. Rob wasn't just a friend, he was a reflection, a warning, and a lesson. He was loud where Ron was quiet, bold where Ron was cautious, but both of them were fueled by the same fire, that relentless hunger to create something real, to find meaning in a world built on performance. As the weeks passed, a strange, quiet tension surrounded Ron. It wasn't anger, it was regret. The kind that lingers in your chest long after the cameras shut off. Their relationship had always been layered, respect mixed with rivalry, admiration blended with distance. Two giants walking parallel paths through Hollywood history, always close but never quite touching. They weren't enemies, far from it. They were each other's shadow. Each one understood the other in ways no one else ever could, but neither ever said it out loud. Rob's fire challenged Ron's calm. Ron's precision slowed Rob's chaos. Together, without ever planning to, they balanced each other out. That unspoken dynamic haunted Ron now more than any unfinished project ever could. He found himself replaying old moments. Calls he meant to return, words he never said, laughs they never got to share again. When a journalist asked Ron about Rob, he went quiet. The room held its breath. Then, finally, Ron said softly, "We didn't always agree, but he made me better. Maybe I never told him that." That single sentence cut through everything. The noise, the speculation, the years of polite distance. It said more than an entire tribute could. Two storytellers, bound by respect, rivalry, and a shared truth neither of them could fully express while they were still here. Ron later explained it perfectly. We were trying to say the same thing, just in different languages. Beneath the rivalry, beneath the applause, beneath decades of separate success, they were chasing the same fragile truth, right? That art isn't about control, it's about connection. By early 2026, the world had already moved on to the next story, the next trend. But for Ron, the silence after Rob's passing only got louder. This wasn't just grief anymore. It was a kind of awakening. A reminder that some stories don't need cameras or scripts to matter. Friends say he started writing again, but not the kind of project anyone expected. Not another studio film, not another high-pressure production. Something quiet, something deeply personal. A story about two creators walking the same road, mistaking reflection for rivalry, chasing truth in opposite directions, and realizing too late they'd been talking about the same thing all along. It wasn't a blockbuster, it was therapy. Writing became the only way for Ron to process everything he never said out loud. When asked whether the story was about Rob, Ron just smiled faintly and said, "It's about losing the one person who understood you, even when you didn't always understand each other." That line hit people like a punch. Fans and friends alike fell silent because it wasn't just about Rob anymore. It was about everyone who's ever lost someone that mirrored them so closely they didn't see it until they were gone. And that's where this story finds its ending. Not wrapped in closure, but resting in clarity. Two men, two different worlds, one loud and fearless, one patient and precise. Both driven by the same quiet obsession, to make sense of the chaos around them. Rob did it through emotion and fire. Ron did it through structure and calm. Different paths, same destination. In the end, legacy isn't about perfection. It's about connection. It's about the people who shape us, challenge us, frustrate us, and ultimately teach us who we are. The ones who make us better without ever trying to. The ones whose absence makes the air heavier, whose voice we still hear when making hard choices. Ron knows now that every award, every success, every standing ovation means nothing if the people you love, the ones who understood you best, aren't there to share it. That's why this chapter in his life feels so different. The man who once built worlds on film is now learning how to live in the real one again. His days are slower, his priorities simpler, family dinners, long walks, quiet laughter in the kitchen. The moments he once traded for production schedules now mean everything. Friends describe him as softer now. He listens more, interrupts less. He takes time, not for press tours or premieres, but for the people who've always waited in the background. The same people who held him steady through decades of chaos. Losing Rob and nearly losing Clint didn't just shake him, it reset him. Now, when people ask what drives him, Ron doesn't talk about ambition or legacy. He talks about meaning, about time, about holding on while you still can. He often says he's not chasing perfection anymore, just peace. And maybe that's what Rob's story was always meant to remind him of. That in a world obsessed with spotlight and control, the real victory is learning to let go, to live instead of just work, to tell stories that come from truth, not pressure. As Ron continues his quiet work, the world still watches, but this time it feels different. His story isn't about career milestones anymore. It's about understanding the cost of brilliance and finally choosing balance over burnout. Because maybe in the end, that's what Rob gave him. Not competition, not rivalry, but permission. Permission to stop running, to just be. So what do you think? Was it quiet rivalry, a hidden gift, or something deeper? Something unspoken that kept both men pushing each other forward without realizing it? Drop your thoughts down below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story hit you. Because some stories don't end when the credits roll. Sometimes, that's when they finally start to make sense. See you on the next one.